Hi, welcome in our continuing videos in the series of the law of torts. I believe you're enjoying all the discussions we are having on tort law and the ones that you've just been watching and all that. I hope the points are very clear. Well, in this particular video, what are we going to talk about? In this series of videos, as you saw on the slide, we're going to discuss the law of defamation. The law of defamation. What is defamation? It is common, and you know, for those who go to church and the religiously inclined people, they often say, a good name is better than riches. Show me your friend, I show you your character. Birds of the same feathers flock together. The essence of all these anecdotes and stories and proverbs that we are known to say in our local culture, in our churches, in our religious followings and all that, just goes to point to one important fact, that the reputation of an individual is of essence. Who you are, how people view you, has got the potential to either bring you up or bring you down in your endeavors. Even if you are a company, like, a limited liability company or a sole proprietorship or any kind of business or commercial entity, the reputation that you craft for yourself has the potential of growing your business or bringing your business down. So if someone tries to smash that reputation of you personally, or there are stories that seek to kind of have people, have doubts of a sort, or have an uneasy feeling, I guess you know what I mean, about your personality, who you are, what you stand for, and how people see you, it has a great potential of affecting you. So in law, the branch of the discussion, or the branch of law that deals with how a person can seek protection for some of these potential threats to his reputation or the potential threats to the reputation of the business is what is covered under the law of defamation. So in this series of lectures on this video, on this law of defamation, we're going to discuss what defamation is. That is the first thing. We also try to understand the elements of defamation. If a matter were to go to court and someone was accusing another person of defaming him, what were some of the things that the court would look at and decide that, oh, okay, because there's a presence of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we see that this person has defamed another, or this particular business has been defamed, and therefore some remedies will be prescribed by the court. This is the minimum we are going to discuss. So just hang on as we do the discussion on the law of defamation. Now, it is important that I mention that Ghana, as a common law jurisdiction, has got some of the laws on most of its, most of the areas of the law are founded in the common law, as you know. Now, the common law, as it pertains in England at present, the law on defamation has gone one step, moving away not just from the common law principles that were available, but also having parliaments of England enacting statutes in addition to the common law principles. So when you go to England, there is the common law principles on defamation that works. Then there is the Defamation Act of 1952 and also the Defamation Act of 1996. Because the purpose of our video is to look at the law of defamation as it pertains to Ghana, those statutory provisions that exist in England, the Defamation Acts of 1952 and the Defamation Act of 1996, will not be relevant to our discussion. Any reference that we may make to them will just be for comparative analysis purposes, just to help you understand and get a broader sense of what we mean about defamation. But principally, we rely on the judicial pronouncements that has gone through the courts in Ghana, in our superior courts of judicature, the High Court, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court. Then we also rely on some of these common law principles that are accepted and have also been enshrined in our Ghanaian legal order. So these are going to be the rules that we are going to rely on in discussing the concept of defamation. All right, so once that ball has now been set rolling, let's see what defamation is. What is defamation? Now, we will try and build gradually how defamation has been developed through the common law principles. Then we will now transition into the point where the Ghanaian judicial pronouncement has embraced all these points that we are going to discuss as defamation. First, a very famous case is called Parmiter versus Copeland. It was decided in England in the common law way back in the 19th century. Now, Barker J, who was the justice at the time, who held the matter, was saying some very, very important facts, that a very important pronouncement that is very necessary in our understanding of defamation. Let's look at the quotation that it was given in Palmer versus Copeland. Now, in Palmer versus Copeland, 1840, a public figure who had been defamed and the matter went to court. This was what Baron Park had to say. A defamatory statement is one which is calculated to injure the reputation of another by exposing him to contempt, hatred, or ridicule. You got that? So, the decision in Palmer versus Copeland gives us the earliest identity or the earliest idea of what defamation is, or what a defamatory statement means. It says that anytime a statement is made about a person and the purpose of the statement is calculated to cause the person hatred, ridicule, contempt, we say that that statement is defamatory. So someone can say something about you. Someone can say something about another person. When people hear that story, they begin to look at a person, they just feel like probably striking him with a stone or a rod or something like that. You understand that? We say that that statement could be said to be defamatory. So for example, if someone is walking in our local area here, now usually in our custom in Ghana, and people start shouting at him, calling him thief, thief, or the accounts will say ewiu, or kromfo, or the guys may prefer to say julo, you know, things of all those kind of variations, where the person is being imputed to be a thief of stealing someone's item. What is going to be the immediate reaction of people who are there? Someone will probably just reach out for a stone and try to hit the person with it. Why? Because there is an instant feeling of hatred for such a person. So we are saying that statements like that are made against another person, of course, without proper basis, could be said to be defamatory. Why? Because it will expose the person to hatred, ridicule, or contempt. Now, watch it. We are not in this particular video discussing criminal law to say that maybe whether the person is guilty or not. We are just looking at what could potentially be said to be a defamatory statement. We are saying that any statement by the decision in that case, which is calculated to cause the person hatred, ridicule, contempt, is defamatory. Hope you understand that. So that's the first decision that, from the common law principle, it gives us a sense of what defamation is, or a defamatory statement is. Now, let me hasten to add that it may not be in all instances that people will necessarily feel that kind of hate or excite those strong feelings against another person. There may be times where people may not have those kind of strong aggressive feelings, but still they have a kind of a diminished respect or view of a person. Now, that was also decided in a very important English case. It was called Sim versus Stretch. Lord Atkins had this to say in Sim versus Stretch. Speaking of defamatory statement, he said, it was whether the words tend to lower the plaintiff in the estimation of right-thinking members of society generally. Did you notice that? So in Sim versus Stretch, a very familiar statement or clause that is always spun around when we talk about defamation was established in the case by Lord Atkins. He said that if the words that are made against that person, they tend to lower the person's estimation in the eyes of right-thinking members of the society generally, the court said that that statement could be classified as defamatory. Lower the estimation. What do we mean by that? Let me just say that. You know, sometimes when people look at you, maybe the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, or your personality, there's a certain kind of aura of respect around you, okay? I'm sure maybe you might have ever had the experience where you go around people just say, oh, boss, you know, people greet you like that, or oh, mommy, oh, daddy. These are expressions that people in our local culture here in Ghana tend to accord to persons that they respect. Now, if someone makes a statement that may, for example, cause a person to suddenly refuse to use that, if granted that the person was used to it, the question is why? It means that probably how the person saw you, because of that new information that he has been told or that he has got, it has lowered that kind of respect the person has for you. You understand that? So that is what the court is saying, that if someone makes a statement against another fellow, said that if right-thinking members of the society were there and they hear that statement, it lowers their estimation of him. The kind of respect that they will have given to the person, it comes down. We are saying that that statement is defamatory. So let's imagine that, for example, there is a 60-year-old, an older man in a community. He's well respected. People perhaps call him grandfather and all that. Then one day, as he was walking in the community or somewhere, someone called him, hey, how do they say in our local parlance? Someone called him a pedophile, or what they usually say, anyinga, you know, those kind of statements. So the moment that story goes around, what do you think is going to be people's view of him? Perhaps those who might formerly have been calling him, oh, grandpa, and all that, they will stop. Why? Because when they heard that story, they are beginning to think less of him. So we are saying that if the words tend to lower the person in the estimation of right-thinking members of society generally, we are saying that statement is defamatory. All right, so now it brings us to a very important point here. Right-thinking members of the society. That is something that is also of legal significance. When we say right-thinking members of society, what do we mean by right-thinking members of society? Now, in our next discussion, or this part of our presentation, we're going to look at what we mean by right-thinking members of the society. Now, it is important that I reiterate that all these definitions that we have so far looked at, the first one, impermeable versus Coupland, and the second one that we've just discussed, mentioned in Sim versus Stretch, where we have mentioned lowering the person the estimation of right-thinking members. There is a common thread. There should be some people, a third person or a third group of persons, to whom these statements or actions have been represented to. That is, the person who is claiming, the plaintiff, the claimant, the one who says that he has been defamed. The story that has been said about him should have been said to a certain group of people. These people is what the definition is saying, that the right-thinking members of society generally. So what do we mean by the right-thinking members of society? To that, we will refer to a very recent decision of the Supreme Court of Ghana. And the case is entitled Benjamin Dufour versus Bank of Ghana and Graphic Communication Limited. This was reported in 2022, the Ghana Monthly Journal reports. Now, in the Benjamin Dufour case, it was, let me just give you some bit of the facts. Benjamin Dufour was a worker with Bank of Ghana, and he had some issues with the bank. Now, Graphic Communications, that's those who produce the daily graphic, reported some events that had happened after his issues, that is, after the issues that Benjamin Dufour had with Bank of Ghana. Of course, those issues had him leaving the employment. He left Bank of Ghana. When Graphic Communications reported in the Daily Graphic, they published a story that Benjamin Dufour has been dismissed. Now, Benjamin Dufour actually contended that he was not dismissed, but his appointment was rather terminated. So it was his view that the use of Graphic Communications and Bank of Ghana to say that he has been dismissed, instead of them saying he has been terminated, like his appointment had been terminated, amounted to defamation. It kind of defamed him, lowered him in the eyes of right-thinking members of society. So the matter traveled to the Supreme Court, and the Apex Court had to make a determination whether the claim by Benjamin Dufour that his appointment having been terminated but still being reported by Daily Graphic as dismissed amounted to defamation. Now, in an erudite judgment that was given by her ladyship, Professor Henrietta Mensah-Bonsu, Mrs., had this to say about it. Let's look at it. Her ladyship mentioned that, speaking about the right-thinking member, he said that the answer is the reasonable man. The standard must be that of the ordinary citizen who is neither unusually suspicious or unusually naive, and who does not always interpret the meaning of words as would a lawyer, for he is inhibited by a knowledge of the rules of construction. So you saw in the statement by the ladyship, Professor Mensah-Bonsu, Justice of the Supreme Court, in the Benjamin Dufour case that was recently decided. What did you notice? Now, the Apex Court, of course, adopting most of these principles and giving credit to it and also approval to it from the common law, mentioned in her leadership statements that these persons that we are referring to as right-thinking members, they are reasonable men, reasonable person. And what is a reasonable person? The court is saying that the reasonable person is that person who does not think like a lawyer, which means that the person does not attach any kind of special meaning to words, or the understanding of the word is such that the person should have some kind of detailed knowledge of the language, its syntax, its rules of construction and all that. The person should have that. Now, that is a kind of a specialized thinking. The court is saying that we are just looking at a reasonable person, an ordinary person on the street, a person who just, lives his normal life, and he has not got any sophisticated reasoning about issues. He is not cynical. He is not unusually naive or unusually suspicious. We are just talking about an average person. So the Supreme Court is saying that, look, if you were to ask the ordinary Ghanaian man on the street, even the difference between dismissed and terminate, how many people can tell you that? Let's say you just call 10 people randomly on the street and ask them, please, what is the difference between dismissal and termination of employment? Are you sure they will be able to tell the difference? Obviously not. So the position of the Supreme Court is saying that the right-thinking members means that ordinarily people will not be able to differentiate the weight of defamation that comes with dismissal as against what comes with termination, because they may not even be able to make out the clear difference at all. You get that? So that is what we mean by right-thinking members. People who are not sophisticated. A reasonable mind. A reasonable mind. So in the context of the situation, if you were to take an average person, okay, out of 10, how many people? Probably only 1 out of 10 of the people may be able to make that difference between dismissal or termination. So the point that we are picking from this Benjamin Dufour case, that the Supreme Court has also mentioned and expanded on the idea of the right-thinking members, is that they are the shoes of a reasonable person. So if the actions that the person is claiming to be defamatory, an ordinary person, a reasonable person, will be able to conceive it like that, then we refer to those as what? The right-thinking members of the society. So again, we go back to the second definition on the sin versus stretch, where we are saying that a defamatory statement is that in which the words will tend to lower the person the estimation of right-thinking members of the society generally. Simply means that if the words are such that reasonable and ordinary men, when they hear that, when they see that action, they will construe that to kind of find it defamatory, or it will lower the expectation or the respect they have about the plaintiff. We are saying that that particular statement is defamatory. So like the earlier example I gave you, if someone were to go around in our local here in Ghana, and any older person, any middle-aged person, and anybody should call the person Anyinga, I'm sure you know ordinarily what would be our thinking. We will see the person as a pedophile. But if we were to use the word, you are a pedophile, I'm not sure many people may even understand the meaning of that word. You understand that? So this is kind of the balance of understanding that the courts look to when we are saying that the words or action would, to a reasonable man, depending on the needs of the society and the thinking of the society, construe that to be defamatory of the person. Then we say that those words or actions are defamatory. Okay. Now let's look at the third other common law definition that has popped up on words or actions that are defamatory. Then we just try and put all that up, then we see. Now that case was in the common law case of Owusu, okay, versus Metro Goldwyn Mayer. You know, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, it's a very large brand. They are involved in the production of films and etc. Now they did a film, and this film was about a Russian princess. Okay. Now, this Russian princess, in the film, it was imputed that she had been raped by Rasputin. If you know a bit of Russian history, you understand how people felt about Rasputin, the kind of reputation Rasputin had. Okay, and for a Russian princess to have been raped by Rasputin, as was imputed in the video, the lady took it to court. The princess took it to court that for MGM to make a video that imputed to the minds of viewers that she, the Russian princess, had been raped by Rasputin. It felt that it was defamatory of her. Now, this was what the court had to say by Slezar LJ in the case of Yusupov versus MGM. By court, it says to make the claimants to be shunned and avoided. You saw that. So the key phrase that we take from that third point is to make the person to be shunned or avoided. That is the third layer of the definition on what constitutes a defamatory statement. The statement should be of such potential to make the person to be shunned or avoided. Okay? There are times that statements that people may make about people or representations that they make either orally, by actions, or by drawings, or by paintings, or any other form. When someone sees that the person will just want to shun away from this claimant or this other person, we are saying that if the words or actions have got the potential to make people shun him or avoid his company, that statement could be said to be defamatory in character. So, for example, someone may be branded an alcoholic. What we say in our local parlance that, or you're kominseni. He's an alcoholic. He's a drunkard. Now, if right-thinking members, reasonable people in the society, were to see someone to have a reputation of being a drunkard, I'm not sure even serious minds would want to even sit down with him for any purposeful discussion. True or false? That is a fact. So you realize that because of that representation, those remarks that were made about the person as being kominseni, drunkard, or alcoholic, people will tend to shun away from him. Okay? So if a statement or a conduct is like that, we are saying that it is defamatory. Now, at this point, we just want to mention some other general actions or statements, imputations that people may make that also come under the umbrella of these three definitions. Remember, we've mentioned about it being calculated to cause the person hate, ridicule, or contempt. We've mentioned about the fact that it may lower the person in the estimation of right-thinking members of the society generally. Then we also added the third part in this definition, which is also saying that it is of such a form that it will cause him to be shunned or avoided by people. Let's add some other actions. These are not part of the definition, but some other occurrences, representations that may actually also give rise to a very defamatory situation. Let's look at some of them. For example, you may have the first one where there is an imputation to a criminal act or criminal offense. I mean, these things like that, it could also cause people to shun others or avoid them. For example, if someone is called a fraudster, he's a thief, or a cromfor, as we say in the julo, you know, those things, and whatever many of the cultures in Ghana may say. That is a crime. If you impute crime to someone, people will now begin to either hate him or they treat him with contempt, okay, or they ridicule him. It will lower his respect in the estimation of right-thinking people, because who wants to associate with a criminal? Who wants to associate with a thief? Or someone will call someone a rapist, okay, a rapist, and those kind of things. So the imputation of criminal offenses, where the crime is of such kind of severity, it has the capacity of being defamatory of the person to whom it was directed against. Then the second other thing that we can talk about is, number 2, is the imputation of unchaste conduct. Unchaste conduct. Okay. For example, if someone is called a womanizer, a man, respectable man, and probably somewhere in his community or someone calls him, oh, a womanizer, he's a flirt. How are people going to feel about him? Obviously, it's going to create some kind of uneasy feelings, and the expectation, the way people see him would also come down. So things like that. Even in England, actually, in the common law, around 1891, they even had an imputation of unchastity of a woman. The Slander of Women's Act of 1891 in England. And it was said that it barred anybody, okay, or there were punitive measures against people who imputed adultery and other forms of unchaste conduct to women. But in Ghana, we don't have that kind of statute, but it's just trying to give us a sense of what we are meaning here. Then number three, the important aspect of number 3 that we want to look at is where there is an imputation of incompetence, okay, or anything of such sort, in a person's trade, calling, business, or something like that, it could also be defamatory. This is what we are trying to say. If someone makes a statement or makes a representation, an action, a gesture, anything of such sort, okay, that is said that it calls into question a person's competence in respect of a trade that he does or a business, a calling in which he finds himself in, those particular statements could be said to be defamatory. You understand that? For example, let's say someone looks up to a judge and accuses a judge of being a liar. Says, this judge, he's a liar. What does that mean? Ordinarily, if he were not a judge and you were to have called him a liar, it may not actually have created much of a problem. But if you label a judge a liar, that is of some significance. You get that? Because obviously we know that judges, by their roles and what the law provides, is that they are supposed to espouse the truth. At least once people bring matters to court, they expect that justice is done. And justice and truth, we know, are bedmates. So if someone who is there sitting in the courtroom to dispense justice is accused of being a liar, it calls into question his competence as a judge. So that could be defamatory if he so finds it like that. So that's an example we're seeing. Or let's say, for example, there is a pastor, okay? A pastor that people, someone says that this pastor is a womanizer. If perhaps he was some other businessman or somebody else who was not in that particular category of religiosity, it will not carry that kind of depth of weight as against it being said of a pastor. Because the understanding and belief is that pastors are religious. They carry the word of God. The word of God, at least to many church-going people and Christians, understand it to mean that pastors are supposed to be morally upright people. So if they are married, they stay with their wives. They don't go after other women and that stuff. So if someone should speak of a pastor that this pastor is a womanizer, what does that mean? He is imputing some kind of failing, some kind of incompetence, some kind of bad conduct to his trade or his calling. So his calling of being a religious man will be put into doubt and people will have lower expectation of him. So that could have that. Or let's say in the final example, someone says that this teacher is daft. This teacher is daft. What here in our lookup, here in Ghana, people may say, wabon. You may call anybody say wabon. I mean, the person is daft. He doesn't know what he's doing. It may not be much of a problem. But if someone were to represent to a teacher whose job is to give off knowledge to people, to impart knowledge that wabon, depending on the circumstance, obviously, that could be defamatory of him. It will cause people to shun or avoid him. Because if I'm a parent and someone says that this teacher will wabon, obviously he's daft. I'm not sure that any parent or you or your father or anyone else there would want to even recruit that teacher to kind of teach his kids. So basically, these are some of the examples that fit into the area of number 3, where we are saying that when there is an imputation to a failing or an incompetence to a person's work, trade, or business and all that. It is important that we touch that. The imputation should be connected to the person's work. So if what the person is saying is not necessarily connected to his work, it may not necessarily constitute a defamatory word or statement. So we've mentioned the imputation of unchaste conduct. We've mentioned imputation of criminal offense. We've also mentioned imputation to a failing or an incompetence to a person's work. So all this together gives us a sense of what defamation is. So looking at all these 3 common law principles and definitions that we've mentioned, from Parmita versus Coupland, from Sim versus Stretch, from the third one of the Yusupov versus MGM, then also looking at the exposition that was given by the learned Justice Professor Mensah Bonsu in the Benjamin Dufour versus Bank of Ghana and the graphic communication, we'll try and do a summing up of all this. What is the definition of defamation according to Ghanaian law? Now, to this, we will refer and close our remarks with a very powerful decision or a powerful definition that was given by His Lordship Benin JSC, as it then was, in the case of Owusu Domena versus Amoah. His Lordship Benin actually quoted and summarized all these principles that had been expounded in the common law position and condensed it into a very powerful definition of what defamation is in Ghana's legal order. Let's see what His Lordship Benin said as he then was in the Owusu Domena vs. Amoah case about defamation. A defamatory statement is a statement which tends to lower a person in the estimation of right-thinking members of society generally, or to expose him to hatred, contempt, or ridicule, or to convey an imputation on him, disparaging or injurious to him in his office, profession, calling, trade, or business. So we got that clear, succinct, by His Lordship Benin JSC, as it then was in the Owusu Domena vs. Amoah case. So you realize that in Ghana's legal order today, this is the definition of defamation. It is a condensation and a crystallization of all the common law principles there. So if you are a student and in your LLB courses and you are taking a course on law of tort, or you are preparing, if you are asked what is defamation, by the laws of Ghana, this Owusu Domena vs. Amoah case, the decision given there, it's a condensation, like I said, of what we mean by defamation. Succinct, so there's no need for us to go in anymore. Okay, so it's very clear for us to understand that. So basically, when we talk about defamation, this is what the law speaks about defamation. All right. Now, the next part of the discussion, which is going to be very interesting, is what then are the key elements of defamation? Of course, all these things that we've spoken about, the elements of defamation are inherent in there. They are there. All the definitions tell us a bit about what it is. But we want to kind of itemize it and break it down. If someone were to take an action of defamation to court, someone brought a charge against another person that, look, this person has defamed me, or a company said that the representations or statements that have been made about our company, it is said that it has defamed us. What are the key ingredients that the person needs to prove in court? That is what we refer to as the elements of defamation. Now, in the next video, the video subsequent to this, we are just going to keep a focus on the elements of defamation. What would the court look out for systematically if an action is to be successful for defamation? Stay tuned.